So, hey, happy Wednesday to all our beautiful wifeys. Hey. So we're back. Yes, we are back again with Keeping It Real Wifey, episode 4. We do have wifey Shremitria that's joining us today. Say hey. And then we also have wifey Erica as well that's joining us today for episode 4. So today's topic we're going to be discussing through ups and downs, right? We know that as a wifey, whether we're a new wifey, old school wifey, in the mix of becoming a wifey, we all have to go through ups and downs, right? And sometimes we may have that one wifey that doesn't understand how to deal with ups and downs, and that's what we're here for right now, right? To discuss some things that we go through in ups and downs and how we manage to survive those ups and downs. Um, because we all have been married for a few years, couple of years, and been with our spouses for a very long time. So we can always narrow down those pros and cons on that part. So, our first topic we have, how do you view marriage? How do you view your problems in your marriage? Um, for me, I would say in the beginning it was I kind of ran from them. I kind of
Mhm.
ran. I didn't want to deal with it. Right. I'm like,
Mhm.
no, I'm not dealing with this today. But as I got older into my marriage and opened up my prayers to God and say, lead me and guide me through the ups and downs that I have to face, I learned that it's okay to admit when you're wrong in those ups and downs and just apologize for it. So that's my thoughts on how I deal with that. Majority of my problems that I may have in my marriage. Yeah, part.
Mhm. Okay. So when you say you ran from your problems, or did you view the problems in your marriage as a threat? Like, were you running away
Um,
from the threat, or what was
I
going
think I ran from them because sometimes it was my fault and I didn't want to admit it,
on? Okay.
and I didn't want to take ownership of it, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's the reason why I try to run away from it or just avoid it. Period. I don't like we. I'm just going to shut down. We're not going to talk about it. I don't want to discuss it, and that's it.
Mhm.
So I think that's what it was in the beginning. But now I'm more okay. Let's figure this out. Let's
Mhm.
talk about it. Let's pray about it. What are we going to do to fix it? So
Mhm. Okay, that's interesting.
very, huh?
Yeah. I mean, and I asked that question because we're talking about like how you view problems. I think how we view the problems in our relationships or in our marriage is going to determine how we respond to them, right? So that's why I asked, like, what was you running from? Like, did you feel like the problems in your marriage and your relationship meant that, okay, my marriage is going to fail, if we continue down this path, or you looked at that problem as being a threat? um because sometimes we perceive like disagreements, right, and
Right.
arguments as this big problematic thing that's an indicator that this is not going to work. you know why did we get married? We made a bad decision. So we have to really be careful with how we view problems in our relationship, and like if we're exaggerating problems and
Yeah,
making them bigger than what they were.
I agree. But I think that was the main reason. Not trying to own up to because when you go through ups and downs, and sometimes if you're the reason for the downfall, you don't know if that downfall is really gonna, like you say, traumatize your marriage, or whether you're gonna be able to talk about it, work it out, and move on from it.
Hmm.
So
Okay. All right.
yeah. Miss Erica.
I Yeah, I was gonna say I think I was a little different when we were recently married or when we were younger. I was very vocal. I've always been very
Mm,
vocal. So I feel that now, as years have passed by, I've learned to listen and not. speak what I feel, because that also can get you in trouble. So I
Right.
feel like I was always, okay, yeah, maybe I fought, but then you did that. So I was always ready to, yeah, maybe I was at fault some things, but I was ready to point back that finger and say, well, you did all of this that caused that. And as time goes by, like I said earlier, you start to analyze what you did wrong as well and take ownership, like you said earlier. So not only am I finding myself taking ownership of things that I did, but I'm also now knowing and that I have to put God first and let Him guide me as a wife, and also let Him guide my husband, guide us both.
Mm-hmm.
So early on, when you recognized problems in your marriage, how did you view them? Like, did you view problems in your marriage as like, oh, like, why did we do this? You know, we messed up. You know, how did you view problems in your marriage?
Yes, I think that I always viewed them as, why did I get married, or why did I do this? Why did I do that? So it's always like questioning, why did I do something, right? Or why were we together? What was the whole point of being together to begin with if we had so many problems and issues, or we didn't get along? Because it's way
Right.
different when you're dating and then you
Right.
actually get
Yeah.
married and you live with this person and you get to see all of the flaws and they get to see your flaws too. But then you're mostly looking at like, okay, he doesn't put the towel, doesn't put it up to dry. It's like simple things.
Lord,
Like the
yes, yes.
littlest thing that will get you. Why do you put the toilet paper like that? It's supposed to go the
Yeah.
other way around. It's like the simple things.
Put
And
Yeah.
the
so,
toilet seat down,
right,
right?
yeah, we
Yeah.
prepare
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have bigger problems or bigger decisions that you have to make. But when you're younger and you're not prepared for that, I
Mm-hmm.
feel that sometimes we can say or act a type of way
Mm-hmm.
that later on we'll regret. So
Yeah.
I feel like I've always viewed my problems when we were younger and we were early on in our marriage as
Mm-hmm.
to, why did we even get married to begin with?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We're really prepared because now we're
Yeah.
upset with small things. So
Yeah.
Right.
that time goes by and you turn and you're older, obviously always putting God first, your mentality changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. My husband and I, we dated for 9 years before we got married, and we've been married now for 7. And like we had a lot of ups and downs in our relationship when we dated, but like toward the end, and Keisha, you know the story. Like I said, I was able to see like God show up in a way that indicated like, okay, like this is my husband, like this, you know, this is who I'm supposed to marry. Like even though we did have like our trials and things like that early on, but I remember right after we married, we had this. Everything was going like perfect. We were on cloud 9, and then we had some type of disagreement. I don't know, but it's like immediately. I think we had been married like maybe a month or so before we had the disagreement. And when we had the disagreement, the first thing that flew across my mind was like, did I make a mistake? You know, like, and I think like that's just our go-to when
Mm-hmm.
when we're faced with any type of conflict in our relationships or in our marriages. And I think a lot of that has to do with if how we viewed problems from like our parents, how they handle problems. Some of our parents ended up divorcing. I know mine did. um and a lot of the conflict would not end well, in a lot of relationships that I've seen. And so problems were like a red flag. Like, okay, so if we're having problems now, like early on, we only been married a month, like if we're having problems
Right.
now, this is a red flag. Like, okay, like we're going to end up divorcing. And I think once that thought gets planted in your mind, every little thing kind of like validates that thought. So now you're looking for things and
Right.
end up exaggerating small things, and making them bigger than what they are based
Right.
on those type of fears.
Yeah, and you know what? For me, I didn't really witness my parents go through a lot of ups and downs. But I do recall one, really, really down. One time in their marriage where it was really, really down, right? And both of my parents were pretty calm about it, right? They discussed it, they talked about it, and was like, you know, what do we have to do to make it work,
Mm.
right? And each of them gave their their thoughts of how we're going to make it work, and not decide just to throw our marriage away after all these years with us going through ups and downs, right? So for me to experience that, and then for me going into my marriage and me facing ups and downs, and I'm not even wanting to discuss it, right? I'm not even wanting to talk about it. I'm just shutting down, and we're not even going to discuss it. I'm done with it. That's it's different. It's different for me. And my mom always say, well, keep it's a different generation. It
Yeah.
takes a little bit more effort than it did when your dad and I was, married and was going through things. And I'm like, yeah, but it shouldn't be that different, right? And my mom, she's always a mother that she doesn't want to know your problems in your marriage, because she don't want to take sides, right?
Mhm.
Because once those ups and downs are settled, she wants to have that grudge against my husband or against me. So
Okay.
she's one of those mothers that's like, I don't want to hear it. That is your marriage. You fix it.
Wow, that's awesome.
So
Okay.
all the time, she's been like that
Mm-hmm.
since my brothers were married, my sisters, and even with me. And I'd be like, but no, and she's like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want.
In your household. Like, don't tell me.
You know,
Yeah.
like one thing she did tell me is think about, what you seen your dad and I do, and then you navigate through that.
Wow.
Like, but darn, that's hard. Sometimes you can't even navigate through that. And then
Yeah.
I feel like, because sometimes it's my fault. And then she'll be like, well, you got to figure it out, but I don't want to know about it.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think, yeah. So, I think now the biggest thing I think that gets a marriage between a husband and a wifey through ups and downs is really, really about sitting down, talking about it, and then just pray about it together as a
Yeah.
couple,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, that's what I believe. Now how do we approach those problems in our
Mm-hmm.
marriage? When we're not the cause of the problem, but we see something that is a problem in the marriage, then
Mm-hmm.
that's a different approach.
Yeah, could be, but I think how we approach problems, whether it's our fault or our partner's fault, it is really going to take some introspection on both parts. Like you said, you were able to take accountability. Not everybody can do that, right? So you may feel like, oh well, it wasn't my fault; it was my spouse's fault, or vice versa. And your spouse may think like it wasn't me; it was you. So like introspection is like really the key in really solving problems or trying to identify what the problems are, because that's how we're going to approach a problem, right?
Right.
So like we were talking offline before about defense mechanisms, you know,
Mm,
when our body's natural response to conflict or to stressors or to arguments or disagreements, um, is defenses. So we're either going to go into, which you said, flight.
mhm.
Uh, and you, Erica, you said fight, right? And me, and that's funny that all three of us have different responses
Right.
to stressors because I freeze. So Keisha, you may like, I don't want to talk about this. I'm bouncing.
Right.
I'm like, I don't want to face this. And then Erica, you're like, we're gonna talk this out. We're gonna work this out. Whatever. We're gonna get it to end of it. But me, I'm just like, like I freeze when I'm faced with conflict. And then later on, I'm like, well, I should have just said, I could have said this, or I should have said,
Right.
then I'm
Yep.
thinking of all of these things that I could have possibly said in the midst of that disagreement or the midst of that argument. And
Mhm.
sometimes the freeze makes me shut down and I'll walk away. So I have like that flight and freeze. I'm not a fighter. Like I don't like that part. I just didn't get it. But those are our body's natural way of responding to stress. And so once you get an idea of like, this is how I respond, and that applies to anything, not just in relationships. Like if you and your boss have, some type of conflict, or they call you in to discuss something or some correction, like that adrenaline flows instantly because you're faced with this stressor, or you're put in this situation, and
Right.
you pay attention to what you normally do in that situation. Like, do you go, hey, no, that's not true, blah blah blah? If that's the case, you're a fighter, you know. And if you're like, hey, I'm just not going to sign it, I don't want to talk about it, blah blah blah, then you usually walk away because you're not able to face confrontation, or maybe you just hope that if you walk away, then it's going to die down,
Right.
it's going to go away. And so, yeah, just being mindful of like how you show up in stressful situations, just maybe how you're showing up with your partner during that time of disagreeing. Okay, because if you're always fighting, or if you're always walking away, then you're not really coming to a resolution, and your partner is like, hey, like, you're always walking away, we can't get to the bottom of this, or you always want to fight, and it's not that serious. And so, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yep,
That's
very
true.
true.
But often, um, just for me viewing other marriages, outside of what I've seen growing up, but in the new culture of marriage, the way I see things are, well, it's your fault. Well, you didn't admit to this. Well, why you didn't do it my way? Why wasn't it done this way? It should have been. So, that is simple things like that that causes problems in a marriage, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you have some couples where they don't have a successful marriage after the ups and downs, right? Because pretty much, no one wants to take ownership,
Mm-hmm.
and I think with you, um, in a marriage, in ups and downs, knowing your defense mechanism that helps you to really narrow down the pros and the cons of the ups and downs, and how we're going to fix this so that way it doesn't repeat itself over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. And you're able to, like, now you're able to kind of like, um since you're aware, you know how to show up. So like, if you know you're a fighter, now you're finding ways to approach the conflict in a way that's less aggressive or less abrasive. Like, okay, let me, before I say anything, let me just try to get an understanding. So just having that awareness of how you show up in conflict will allow you to work on yourself and show up in a way that's different, and that can be more receptive to your partner. And I think that's one of the reasons why marriage counseling is just so vital, because it points out those little things that you're not able to recognize, or that you're not even aware of, like your communication styles, your defense mechanisms, how your partner is perceiving you, you
Yeah.
leaving the scene or walking away, or you
Mhm.
know just learning things about yourself and your spouse can help you guys learn how to approach the problem together. Like,
Mhm.
okay, this is the problem, not me and you. Me and you, we're
Right.
working toward this thing instead of I'm working against you. So,
Working against each other. Right. Right.
um,
And you also mentioned something just now, how we communicate, right? So I remember in our marriage counseling class, one of our pastors said, his wife, she's a texter, right? She likes to communicate by text. He's one, he likes to communicate face to face, that's the verbal communication, right? And
mhm.
I think my husband and I are like that. I'm more of, okay, let me text this, this is what I noticed. And he's more of, well, I'm downstairs. You can come downstairs. We can talk about it. But why, when I have this? This is how we communicate, right? But it annoys him a lot. Like it really annoys him to really communicate with texting. And I'm a big texter when it comes to communication.
Yeah.
But Because I didn't want it to cause any conflicts or ups and downs. I said, okay, I'll try to, verbally speak, and we do it face to face versus always just texting
Mm-hmm.
on the phone like I like to. But um, yeah, that's my input. So now I can say, like Erica, I'm more of a fighter than trying to